Hi, I'm Patricia Allingham Carlson. I've been sharing you an end-to-end series of my painting called The Stairway at Buttermilk Falls. This is episode 5 and it's the final episode of this series. Here I am wrapping up the painting. This involves adjusting color accents, looking for where more darks need to be added, and using certain evaluation tools that you'll see me utilizing at the very end of this painting series. I hope you enjoy it, and if you do, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe also to see more. Let's go paint. Coming into the end of the painting, after evaluating, I decided to pick up a very stiff little bristly brush and blend and subdue and tone down my shadows in the rocks first. This brush works quite well to soften the paint and to lift paint. Lifting paint is far more possible on good paper than on a lesser paper. In this case, I'm using some nice Arches paper, and it's very durable and allows some good scrubbing when needed. So in order to keep these rocks from looking very linear, I'm trying to soften the shadows and shading, which also allows them to look more aged. Lifting a little color in the slope on the hillside to lighten the top of the slope section. And next I'm picking up on the plants that are growing on the slopey rocks. I've mixed up a good deep green to add some shading and some definition. This particular plant is a fern. I'm shadowing heavily at the base of it and along some of the edges, picking up some of the details. Using a mixture of Hooker's Green Deep and Viridian. I'm continuing to try to suggest the plant more than spell the plant out. But too many small details on the slope would not add to the painting. Some more scrubbing with this nice little bristly brush. Bristles are quite stiff on it. Working toward the final stages is when you really need to evaluate your painting and see what exactly still needs to be done without overdoing your painting, which is a problem that I've certainly had in the past, and perhaps you have as well. Here I'm adding the shadowed side of the rock on this little stack of rocks in the foreground. I'm also adding some detailing, trying to show some of the jaggedy edges of the rock. Coming up to this front section of the foreground, trying to tone down some of the very strong colors that were applied in the beginning. When they won't tone down, I'm going to try to add to them and make them look a little bit more appropriately placed. Taking some nice yellow ochre, adding some warmth to the foreground and a little bit to the rocks as well. Even if a rock is gray, the minerals in it will sometimes oxidize and turn rusty colored. So again, it's all about adding some warmth to the colds. Kicking up the burnt siennas a little bit and adding some further definition to those distant trees in the middle ground. I realized that I hadn't added quite enough shadowing on the left side of the steps themselves, where the low rocky wall is casting some shadowing on them. A lot of adjusting here. I take a value up much, much darker, and then I decide that that might be a little too dark, so I take it down again. And it's just all a matter of what looks right to your eye. If you're looking at a reference photo, seeing where the reference photo is strong, and deciding if you want to have that as a strong point in your painting as well, or if it doesn't matter. Here I'm using a color called Indian Red to enhance the branches. Just like the trees, the foreground branches were a little intimidating to me because their placement seems very important. Once you decide to make up your mind, though, you can paint decisively and see how it looks. And if you're using a very good paper, you probably can undo any mistakes that you do make. So what I'm trying to do at this point is liven up the foreground a little bit with these dark branches to lead the eye around the foreground and hopefully further into the painting, up the stairs and around the corner and higher up the gorge. Bringing some darks in close to the tree trunk, which is light, assists the eye in saying where the tree starts and where the background starts. And then I'm looking to enhance different distant trees all around the painting. Bring them out a little darker where they need it. I do not want to overdo it with the branches or the branch work. I don't want the painting to look too busy. I want it to be relaxed. And I've decided to add some more darks into that distant cliff shape as well. Popping some accents and some darks around the painting. Now, since the beginning, I planned to make a nice deep foreground branch with some good foliage on it. So I'm adding it at this point. Introduce a little bit of accenting into the left foreground of the painting. I'm using my spray bottle, and I do use it a very lot because it helps me to create a nice, relaxed, and not systematic or regular looking bunch of leaves, pine needles, branches. I'll put down a dark color, I'll give it a spray, and let it travel a bit. And I like the spontaneity of it. For me, it works better than sitting and painting little separate clumps or leaves or pine needles. You could also see I'm using my hand to block where I don't want the spray to go. It helps keep the spray under control to some extent. So I'm popping the foreground, the trees and branch work, with some strong bright colors. I do love how the colors blend themselves right on the paper, as opposed to carefully mixing them in the palette, because the blend is not complete and it feels natural and spontaneous to me. Evaluation time. I'm covering up half the painting bit by bit to see what seems to be needed on the separate quadrants. Isolating it shows me where some touches might be needed. A lot of these touches are accent work using darks. At this point, I had noticed that my trees in the middle ground were not grounded. That is, where they join the earth, generally they will have a shadow. And quite frequently, the very base of a tree trunk is dark. I decided that I needed to define that entire little slope where that group of trees is growing from a bit more clearly with the dark. It breaks up all the endless section of slope and creates some more interest. Using my covering up tool, if you don't get away from your painting and look at it from some distance, or using a tool such as cover up, It's very hard to evaluate. But at this point, I'm calling it done, and I'm signing it. Patricia, Allingham, Carlson, and it's done. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. For more videos like this, subscribe to my channel. Your comments are always welcome as well. Click on the link if you'd like to see my next video or one recommended by YouTube. And there's more links in my description page below. See you next painting.